Welcome to the Hyperthinker vlog. I'm Phil, I'm your host for the next couple of minutes. We've been trying a lot of things, for those of you who follow us on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and we wanted to get more intense on YouTube and talk to people about thoughts. Now, as some of you know, I'm a big fan of creative ideas, digital, and I came up with the word hyperthinking, which is about getting new ideas, shifting perspective, and being inspired. And this is what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the stuff that I think is interesting and things that I've been working on or thinking about for ZN or in general. Today, I want to talk about perception, fake news, and vaccines. Now, why do we want to talk about that? Well, we've worked a lot in this space. Actually, since the H1N1 crisis, we've been working on fake news. I think we hear that term a lot recently. I think Donald Trump
fake news
embraced it as a way to tell the world that the press constantly lies about him. And I think that's why we've heard this word as if it was something new. But in fact, fake news is not new. Propaganda has been with us since the beginning of time. And in fact, there's a recorded historical event where Ramses II fought a war called the Battle of Kadesh. And he painted these glorious paintings showing him defeating the enemy with statues and many texts celebrating his amazing victory. But in fact, if you look at the agreement that they came up with, it was a stalemate. So propaganda and lies have been used by politicians since the beginning of time. But with social media, what we have is an acceleration of the spread of fake news. And I think that's partly because we tend to be quicker. When we see a story, we share it with friends, we share it on Facebook, we share it on Twitter, and often we don't double check the story, so fake news spreads. And I think as individuals, as communicators, we all need to become more responsible in preventing the spread of fake news. And I'll give you a couple of suggestions at the end of this YouTube vlog. H1N1 was a huge crisis for the healthcare industry. When it broke, it was called swine flu, H1N1, and people thought it was going to be a huge pandemic. And at the same time, if you looked at the internet, there were stories spreading left, right, and center, and they were all about how terrifying the vaccines for this pandemic were and how you could die from them, or how it could cause miscarriage or autism. Now, this was debunked, it wasn't true, and so were many of the stories, the myths around vaccines. But at the time they were spreading, and the internet was full of fake stories about vaccines, and people were getting really worried and influenced by those stories. So the problem is that you had these terrifying stories, and a lot of the medical community, a lot of the traditional authorities on the subject were either communicating in a very technical, rather boring way, and people didn't really want to read that. You don't want to read a study of 100 pages on the effects, the medical studies around vaccination, but you love a story of one person who had a terrible reaction after one vaccine, because people like stories. They like stories that convey emotion, and they don't really like facts. But at the same time, they trust doctors. And we've been working with doctors in helping them to use social media, to use Facebook, to create a profile, to better inform their patients about the story. And we got some fantastic examples. We got a Romanian doctor who, you click here, he created his Facebook page and got hundreds of thousands of engagements through his post within a couple of weeks. And that really showed that this was needed, that people want information, and he obviously looks at the information, is very careful, and shares it. And I think it shows that you need people who are knowledgeable and who are authoritative to engage on social media. So doctors really need to use this tool. And a lot of the time they don't see it as part of their job. They think that they're experts at a certain field, but not necessarily communication, and even less social media. But what we found is that the more doctors engage on social media, the more they can change the conversation. Now, we're working on something else, which is actually engaging with people on issues like flu. So we created this community called Flu 65 Plus, in English, French, German, here. And this is about getting a conversation on flu with people who are of the age that we're targeting, and getting them to exchange information with themselves, sharing some information, infographics, questions, tips, etc. But it's mainly about them talking to their peers. And in fact, we want to get more doctors involved so they can have the conversation. But we believe that this is where the conversation is really taking place. This is where people are changing their mind, are being influenced, are shifting the conversation. And that's where communicators need to engage. That's where, if you want, the front line of communication is. It's with social media, it's with the internet. So instead of running away from it, instead of saying, oh my God, it's all about fake news, I think you need to embrace it, engage it, and shape it. That's what we try to do. So I'll leave you with the 3 or 4 tips on how to fight fake news. Tip 1. Check your sources before you share. Now, a lot of the time you get a story and you have this temptation. You want to be the first one to tell other people, oh my God, look at that. What happened in North Korea? What happened? What did Donald Trump tweet about today? So you want to share it with your friends, but check first if it's true. And that means see where the story comes from. Is it from a reputable source? Can you see where it comes from? Is it a source you believe? If that's the case, okay, fine, share it. But even so, still be careful. 2, when you read something from somebody else, see if that person is just sharing some spam. And by the way, if you take the story and you put it in Google, often you can see if it's a spam story because there's lists of this. Tip 3, research your stories, research the background, spend more time analyzing the information. Don't get caught up in sensational stories. Just because the story is emotional does not mean it's true. As communicators, we need to create emotional stories, but as a critic, you need to be detached from the story. You need to analyze it and say, does it really make sense? What makes me think it's true? Tip 4, on Facebook there's an echo chamber, which is essentially that Facebook feeds you information on things you like. And it tends to comfort your views because that's how you spend more time on Facebook, because you like to read stories that agree with you. And what you need to do is follow people that don't agree with you. Follow people that have a different worldview. So it enlarges your perception, it enlarges your views, and it reminds you that people disagree with you and that your job is to constantly challenge your preconceptions and try to make the world a better place. That's all I have for today. Leave me comments, share, subscribe, post, and all these other things, and I'll see you next time.